Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy and his magic telescope in the background. It's not a thermonuclear device that Bruce has there. That is a telescope. How you doing?
I'm doing all right today. I'm almost getting ready to watch some hockey again. Whoever scheduled the Memorial Cup sure blew it. I would have been watching that all this week, and last week I hardly saw any of it because it was all up against the NHL.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was on until it was over. Then I heard who won. Well, Bruce,
the Memorial Cup. I mean, they didn't play the gold medal game in the afternoon. They played it at night, head to head against the Oilers, Dallas. Well,
yeah.
What you gonna do? So I taped it and I watched a chunk of it later, but I didn't feel like I was into it. Whereas, like I say, this week, all these nights, and so where's the hockey? You know, Junior's over, the World Championship's over, and the NHL is on hiatus for a period.
I would have been upset possibly, but it helped the Oilers. The Oilers could have used the rest. I think there's a lot of players there who are probably grateful for. They won't be running on fumes.
No.
And that would have been a possibility if they'd gone right to the Stanley Cup Finals and happened in previous years. So I'm glad for this, actually, and it's going to get going, and that's good. Bruce, I have to say, in a moment of financial insanity, I bought a ticket to Game 3. In related news, I'm remortgaging my house this week. So my son's coming from Victoria and wanted to go.
Oh, so you got 2 tickets?
Well, he bought one and I bought one.
Oh, okay. All right, so he's mortgaging his home, and you're, gotcha.
And he's hitchhiking here, and anyway, I've only been to one Stanley Cup Final game live in my life in 1990. It was the game they lost to Boston.
2-1 to Boston in Game 3.
It was a total bummer. So
Boston scored 10 seconds into the first period, and they got the 2-0 lead and hung on.
It was dead bummer of a game.
I scalped my way into that game.
Totally taking your chances when you go, because it can be otherworldly exciting like Game 6 was, or it can be like Game 3, 1990, the total bummer. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, the series starts tomorrow night, Bruce. And so today in the podcast, we'll start out just by talking about a little bit of funny and smack talk news, that kind of stuff. And then we'll get into lineup changes. We'll end it up with the meaty stuff. Chris Knoblauch, again, looks like at least with some bold moves. Hey, Cat. Out of here, Cat. All right. Bruce, it's interesting. When you go online, I'm going to suggest you'll find quite a bit of antipathy directed at the Edmonton Oilers and their fans, and from Vancouver fans, Toronto fans, and Calgary fans. And it seems pretty prominent on Twitter X, as far as I can see. But anyway, this betting company, Bet Online, did a survey where they attempted to use social media posts and the hashtag Let's Go Oilers and Time to Hunt. Time to Hunt is the hashtag that the Florida Panthers use.
It's like a secret handshake. Right?
Yeah, I like it.
You know the secret handshake, you're probably a Panthers fan.
That's right. And Let's Go Oilers.
I would never find their hashtag, unless, you hit me over the head with it like you just did.
So they searched provinces and states to see who's using these hashtags as kind of a proxy for fan support for the two teams. And as proxies go, I think it's a fairly accurate one for support. And what they found was that in Canada, about that if you add those two uses of those two hashtags together, about 90% of the fans, 80 to 90% of the fans in most Canadian provinces are cheering for the Oilers. They're going with the Let's Go Oilers hashtag. Now, if you're a troll, you might say something nasty about the Oilers, but you're probably not likely to use the Let's Go Oilers thing. So I just thought it was interesting that, generally speaking, it looks like the vast majority of Canadians really are rooting for the Oilers. And actually in most of the northern states, they are as well rooting for the Oilers, which probably speaks to the kind of the quasi-Civil War situation in the states, where Florida is none too popular with people in the northern blue states, and more
I
popular.
noticed the cutoff of that line didn't look too
Mason
different from an
Dixon.
electoral map
Yeah,
in your post of where the
yeah,
Panthers fans were and weren't.
yeah. So there's a lot of support for the Panthers below the Mason Dixon line, and above it, and actually
Not
also
so much.
also actually in some of the blue states like California's more pro Panthers, as is Arizona. Anyway, so I just thought that was interesting, and honestly,
Below the Sun
a
Belt.
little encouraging, because there's there is quite a bit of nasty talk from some fans with their noses bent out of joint in Vancouver and Calgary and Toronto about the Oilers' success. But I always find this when I meet people. You go online and you'll find quite a bit of criticism about the Oilers and about this and that and the other thing. But when you actually meet like just the regular fan, they're fans. They like the team. They're not that overbearing. They're, I mean, most of them, many of them at least, don't think they could do a better job than the coach or the GM. They're just there to cheer the players on and hope for the home team. And that's, I think, Canada's relationship right now with the Edmonton Oilers. Canadians, I think, would like to see the Oilers win, and I get it. If that's the sentiment, and I think it is, it's time for a Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup, and Canadians are back in the Oilers.
Yeah, I heard Wayne Gretzky on TNT the other day. They were asking who he thought would win, and he kind of stick handled around it. But one of his takeaways, at least, was a Florida Cup win would be good for hockey. And I'm going, well, yeah, I guess I've never won one in that specific market before, but the state of Florida has won 2 cups this decade. The entire country of Canada hasn't won a Stanley Cup this century. Maybe it would be good for Canada to finally, at least prove that their teams can compete here. I mean, I would take that as a positive sign, whether I was rooting for any of the Canadian teams, that it's no longer, I mean, you know what the trope is. It's the tax havens that are doing the best. And those don't tend to be in Canada. So the Canadian teams have been struggling. And it would just be nice to buck the trend. And, it's been a long time, Wayne.
Yeah, I think the NHL is in no danger of killing the golden goose, which is Canada, right?
No, that's true. But
so they're not that worried about it. But nonetheless, for Canadian fans, for our morale overall, I think it would give some hope to Canadian fans in every Canadian hockey city if the Oilers win. Now, they don't all have Connor McDavid, but some of them have pretty good players and pretty good, Vancouver is a really good hockey team, and Toronto is a really good hockey team, Winnipeg. So there's some really excellent hockey teams that could compete for the Stanley Cup in the next few years. So, every bit as easily as Florida or Dallas, could. They just got to get the right mix in that moment.
Yep.
So, this will give them hope. I should say, Bruce, in Florida, the on the podcast, there's not that many Florida Panthers podcasts, and most of them are really not that interesting. They just say the most basic kind of boilerplate, boring stuff about the Florida Panthers. There are one or two, though, that are really exciting and interesting and pretty knowledgeable. The Cats and Rats podcast, for one of them. And they just scoff at this notion about the tax haven thing for the players, because they were there for years when Florida wasn't competing, when they were every bit as much as big a tax advantage. And they just think that's not what it's about. It's just about having good management. Where if you have good management, which they now have in Florida, they've had for the last 5 years, you win. If you have Bill Zito and the analytics dude Sonny Mehta in Montreal or Ottawa or Edmonton, if you have good management, you win. And I think there's a lot to be said for that point of view, that this isn't about so much about palm trees and tax advantages. This is about a sharp management teams in cities like Dallas, Tampa, and Florida. So
Sunbelt cities, eh?
Yeah. So speaking of the Cats and Rats podcast, it was very interesting. They were talking a lot of smack talk about the Oilers, and I don't want to get into most of it, but there was I just want to give they're super confident that the Florida Panthers are going to win this series, and this is backed up by I did the online thing where I looked at what all the different all the NHL experts online, from TNT to NHL.com to the Cult of Hockey to the Fourth Period, Dauber Hockey, all the experts. I found 131 of them, and 75% of them were picking the Florida Panthers to beat the Oilers in this series, which is just a little bit less. Last series, it was 80% that was picking the Dallas Stars. So these
94% that picked the Oilers to beat the Canucks, which they eventually did, but only after leaving most of the 94% doubting their prediction at some point during that series.
And 89% picked the Oilers over the Kings, which was dead on. But you're right, like the Vancouver thing just could have gone either way. And if Brock Besser hadn't been injured or sick with his blood clot issue, and Thatcher Demko right off the top. But then if it was Thatcher Demko, he was hurt before the series, so that
might have affected the predictions.
Yeah, so that would have been more like Anyway, the Florida fans certainly have that confidence of a team that's favored by 3 out of 4 NHL analysts, and one of them was saying this. This is an example of their confidence. So this is Cody Stevens. And this is on how Florida D-man Aaron Ekblad, who is quite an excellent hockey player, will handle Connor McDavid in a way the Dallas Stars failed to do. And Cody says, I feel like Dallas switched their style to trying to be like Edmonton. That's not going to happen this series. It felt like at times Dallas just let Edmonton do whatever they wanted. We were disgusted by Dallas, disgusted. That power play goal by Connor McDavid in Game 6, that highlight reel goal, which was like the handle is ridiculous. That's not going to happen against us. That's Ekblad's side. You think Ekblad's just going to make himself smaller and let McDavid get to the slot? No, he's going to put him on his behind there. Are you kidding me?
Well, certainly it's true that Miro Heiskanen is no Aaron Ekblad. On the other hand, you have a hell of a discussion as to which one is actually a better player. Like it's Heiskanen that McDavid looks silly there. It does not look silly very often. But he got beat fair and square, and I wouldn't suggest that being bigger or stronger had a whole lot to do with it. McDavid was quicker and faster, and that was the decisive part of that encounter.
Bruce, what do you think about the experts, all the analysts, and the confidence in Florida being so certain about Dallas? I mean, it's a fair degree of certainty, fairly high, I'm going to suggest. Excuse me, about Florida.
Oh, Florida, yeah. Well,
season behind.
It's the same thing, you got this sort of conventional wisdom that just floods the pool, it feels like, and everybody goes with the rising tide. And for the most part this year, the favorites have mostly won. And,
yes.
But there's been a couple of, like Dallas against Edmonton that was misread by a lot of people. And some might say Edmonton was lucky to win that series, that they should have won Game 6, which I think you can make a strong case for that. But it's any pool of experts that's much up to either side of 50-50. I don't see why that would be. Like, you could pick one or pick the other. You could flip a coin or just guess. Or, it's hockey, right? It's going to be decided by the bounce of a puck or call, or it's the better team you hope wins, but there's always that possibility of randomness intervening and ruling the day. So I'm never more confident than 60-40 in pretty much any series. I mean, we're not talking about the Oilers against the Los Angeles Kings in 1985 here, right? We're talking about parity era, top teams in the league. It's going to be close. And I don't have a real strong lean one way or the other in terms of who's going to win. I'm just interested to watch and find out.
I think having read more about the Florida play, Um, I think they're a team that's uniquely structured with their tactics and their personnel to beat the Oilers. But I also think the Oilers are also uniquely structured to beat the Panthers. So what I mean by that is this: that the Oilers have played some really aggressive hitting teams already in Vancouver and Los Angeles. And I think the Florida Panthers are kind of like the Vancouver Canucks plus. The Vancouver Canucks like to get in hard on the forecheck and press. They were a pressing team. Florida is even more of a pressing team. They press with two forwards on the forecheck. They press with defensemen pinching up the boards. They press in the neutral zone. They're not like LA hit sitting back. Their gap is super tight in the neutral zone. They're on you in the offensive zone. They're on you in the neutral zone. They're trying to get that puck back. And when they get it back, they take it hard they get it deep, and then they take it out in front of the net. So they get the puck deep behind the net, and then they take it rapidly to the front of the net. That's where Edmonton, that's a situation where Stuart Skinner has struggled picking up pucks. And it's a situation where most of the Oilers defensemen have struggled in coverage, and centers have struggled in coverage, covering that quick play from behind the net. That's an area that's ripe for the picking on the Oilers and has been for some time. And they're going to have to get better fast on that. So that's why Florida, I think, is uniquely built to beat the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers defensemen, some of them struggle to move the puck. It's less so now that Broberg's in for Desharnais. If you ask me, Broberg's much faster getting back to the puck, much faster moving it, changes the Oilers significantly. But it's still an issue. And Florida can take advantage there. That said, if there's a team, the way you beat a pressing team is you attack them fast. It's just fast as you can. You move that puck and you take it as fast as you can right to the opposition net. So it's a bang pass and it's a bang another pass and bang, a player's in on net. That kind of fast breaking, attacking style, the Oilers are better, play that game better than anyone in the NHL except for maybe the Colorado Avalanche, because that is a style of play which takes a great amount of talent and skill and passing ability to play. That's what the Oilers have in players like Bouchard, Ekholm, McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Holloway. They've got a bunch of, and even some of McLeod, Fogle, even some of the other players can attack fast. Nugent Hopkins attack fast up the ice. So if there's a team that can exploit Florida, if Florida just makes one slip on their press, one mistake, well, the Oilers get a breakaway, or they get a break.
Give them a chance to recover, right? Like you go hard. Once you get through the pressure, you go.
And you often see this kind of pressing in basketball. And if you beat the press in basketball, well, you get 2 points in a game where you're going to score 100 points. If you beat the press in hockey, let's say 3 or 4 times a game, you get a goal or 2. And that's the difference between winning or losing. It's hugely significant if you can beat the press, if you can punish the press by their over-aggression, their hyper-aggression with skill and speed. And I think this is why I favor the Oilers. I think they have what it takes to beat the Florida press. And when that happens, I mean, this commentator, Cody Stevens, was confident that that Dallas started to play the Oilers game. Well, no, the Oilers beat Dallas at their own game. They were doing, patient defense, disciplined defense in the end, just as well as Dallas was. That's what happened in that series. And the Oilers always play their game, which is to attack. So I don't, what happens to Florida when they start to get beat, if they get beat on the press for goals against by the Oilers? I mean, something's got to give. I guess they won't take their foot off the gas ever, because that's just what they do. But it might start to look like they're playing the Oilers game, which is in a game where people need to score. They're going to be trying even more desperate to score. And then maybe the Oilers really have you, though, because that's when you're even going to press harder and you're more likely to make a mistake. So it's going to be a very interesting series, I think, because of this aspect to it.
New York Rangers are a pretty good team. And Florida, the games I watched, even the ones that the Rangers won, I sort of went, well, they got the goal in the overtime that won it, but I'm not at all sure they were the better team. over the course of the series, I became pretty convinced that Florida was the better team. And even though all the games were super close, but it seemed like inevitable that they were going to come out on top at the end. So I mean, their strategy works. They had a lot of games where they were like out shooting by a pretty wide margin, and Bobrovsky was solid enough behind him that even against a super goalie like Shesterkin, who played, I thought, really well in that series, they they were able to create enough quality opportunities to beat him 2 or 3 times in the game and make it stand up. So it's a scary team.
It
I
is.
got a lot of
Yeah.
respect for Florida, back in the finals for second year. And I'll tell you what, that hiring of Bill Zito, I've been tracking that with great interest because he was on the short list for the Oilers, back in 2019 when Chiarelli was axed, and they had Keith Gretzky as the interim, and then they were doing interviews and so on. And Zito, it sounded like he might even have an inside track until Ken Holland threw his hat in the ring, and that was seemingly the end of the competition. And they hired Holland. Took Zito another year, but he wound up in Florida, and that team just started turning around. They had a good year in regular season in 21. They won the President's Trophy in 22. Like, that's how long it took. And one playoff series. And last year they went to the finals. This year they're going again to the finals after winning their division in the regular season. Like, there's measurable progress being made there every year, and they've emerged as a powerhouse of at least the Eastern Conference.
And a lot of really cagey, canny pickups there, right? Gustav Forling on waivers, Sam Bennett. They didn't give him much to get him, and they traded Huberdeau and Uyghur for Kachuk.
Oh, what a steal!
And I mean, I thought that was a great trade from the moment it was made, honestly, because I just think Matthew Kachuk's a fantastic hockey player. Yeah, they really know what they're doing. But Ken Holland, he said he let slip a little interesting fact. He was on Oilers Now and was talking about the Ekholm trade, and he said, I've got a good relationship with those guys in Nashville, and he made that trade for Ekholm. And that's what Ken Holland brings, right? That deep NHL experience, relationships with other people. So when a player like Ekholm comes available, maybe he's more likely to come to Edmonton than, let's say, maybe even Florida, where they might not have that connection. So and Ken Holland's also a pretty astute customer in many ways. So the Oilers have made some good moves too. Like
both have.
That's my point. Both of them have, yeah.
Both
and some mistakes. I don't know if Florida's made big mistakes. Holland's made a few of those, but I don't know if it's interesting though. If you think about Holland's tenure, he takes over the team, and two of his three best defensemen are Larson and Klefbom, and boom, within a year, both of them are gone. So that's a major setback right at the start. And this has been the story of the Oilers, is losing the defenseman Sekera, Klefbom, and Larson have been defining moments of the McDavid era that set the team back in terms of getting to the Stanley Cup Finals considerably.
They were all solid top fours.
Bruce, let's get into the meat of things. Chris Knoblauch's lineup changes. So he's gone back to the defense partnership of Cody Ceci and Darnell Nurse, which was split up in the Vancouver series, and they were split up because in their 165 minutes together, mainly in the Los Angeles series, but also early games in the Vancouver series, they were on for 5 goals for and 12 goals against. 5 goals for and 12 goals against.
That's a minus per game. -1 per game. In that series? Just in that Vancouver series?
That's the entire time of the playoffs.
Oh, okay.
Vancouver and Los Angeles. So what do you think about that?
I'm sure Oil Country is singing in unison the praises of Knoblauch, Nurse, and Ceci as we do this podcast. I personally have some reservations, I have to admit. But I thought, frankly, the move to Cece Cece and with Broberg and of Kulak with Nurse was a turning point of the Dallas series. They went to that in Game 4, and then they won three straight games. So I'm a little bit surprised that they're messing with that. Frankly, I thought Broberg and CC were okay, and uh, Kulak had a couple of shaky moments, but thought he and Nurse were, okay. And the thing about the Oilers, their top pairing is so good, like very close to the best pair in the NHL. I would make the case at this point. Uh, you just want to find sort of stability underneath, and it looked like they'd found that. So I'm not quite sure why. The evidence, the Nurse CC pairing has got a long statistical history now,
Yes.
and the recent portion of it is not promising. And
Yeah.
so, why flog that horse? But
Why? Why, Bruce? I don't get it
he's the
either. It
coach.
makes
He's got the keys.
no.
We're just along for the ride.
Yeah. So Nurse has been on an even strength in these playoffs. 8 goals for, 23 goals against. It's just, and he hasn't played well. Like I know some people, he's played well in this game or that game. Yes, he has had a few good games, and he did look. I thought he looked better with Kulak. I thought, okay,
Okay.
they finally figured it out. Now they're moving away from it. I don't get it, and I don't like it. So, but the coach has made other moves that I didn't agree with. Going back to Skinner over Pickard, I was against that, and it worked out very well in the end. So I hope I'm wrong about this. The one thing that occurs to me is that maybe the real second pairing on the team now is Broberg Kulak against a team that they've got two lines that are really dangerous offensively, and the coach might be thinking, I need two pairs of defensemen who I can send out as much as I can against those two lines. The Bennett line with Kachuk and Rodriguez, and then the Barkov line with Verhage and Reinhardt. So those two lines, and you might be thinking, okay, I can put Ekholm and Bouchard out there against. Ekholm and Bouchard are 21 goals for, 12 against. I can put them out there, and it'll be okay. I need another defense pairing. Who's that? And he's thinking, is it Kulak, Nurse? And he might not be that sure. And he's thinking, well, Broberg and Kulak, they have similar skill set. They're both really fast. They're dependable defensively, and they can retrieve pucks quickly and move them fast. Maybe that'll work against this particular team, against the style that they're using, and then we'll play Nurse and CC against the third and fourth lines as much as we can. That could be the strategy. I mean, that might be what's being contemplated here. Otherwise, I don't honestly get it. Like if they think that they're going to put Nurse and CC in heavy lifting against the Kachuk, the Sam Bennett line, or the Barkov line, I mean, good luck with that. But I'll be cheering for them, but I won't. I'm skeptical.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit I'm skeptical about Kulak Broberg as a second pairing. Kulak was on the third pairing all year, and he was number 6 in ice time for chunks of the season because he wasn't on either of the special teams, right? So even his own partner, typically DeHarnay, was getting more minutes because he was logging 2-3 minutes a night on the kill. And so we'll just call him third pairing, 5 or 6, you decide. Broberg wasn't even fourth pairing. He was in the minors and playing, and and it was the right decision for him. If he's got to be playing somewhere, and he was, and they called him up. But basically that's your number. Let's call him number 5 and number 8 defenseman. From throughout this entire season, neither of them was a regular on the second pairing. So to me, they're still likely the third pairing, and they're just going to suck it up with their experienced shutdown pairing, as they call it, which would sound more like a shut pairing without that minus 23 on the goals against side of things. My goodness, that's Nurse.
That's Nurse. Yeah.
I do think he was good in the last 3 games against.
Yeah, he was.
When they
I
put him
agree.
with Kulak, and they were still like minus in 2 of the games, I think. And they gave up 1 goal in the whole game, and somehow they'd be on the ice for it. Nurse is, he's a minus magnet.
This playoff season.
Last while, yeah.
Yeah. The one goal I remember was on Kulak. It was like their first shift together, and he let a rush go up the ice. So that was
he was on the wrong side, and he got crossed up right away first shift. Yeah, I was just covering my hands at that point.
He settled down. Of course, Holloway was supposed to be covering for them, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and that didn't happen. Okay, so I think we've dealt with that. But hopefully it works. I think the last thing I'll say about it, I do think the Oilers made an organizational mistake this year. They needed to bring Broberg up earlier.
Get him playing.
They needed to anticipate this. Like when CC started to go and Nurse started to go south in February, that's when that pairing really went downhill fast. Mm-hmm. By March 1st, I know they tried Desharnais and Nurse, and they were thinking that might work. I think at that point, when that didn't work, they should have thought, and brought up Broberg and get him in. Sit Desharnais, sit CC for some games, get Broberg in the games, get him playing, and see if they can make it work, get him more time. But he's looked really good in his 3 games so far. Like he is. It's not like he's a raw rookie. He's been a pro in North America now for 3 years,
right?
And played a lot between the Oilers and Bakersfield. So he is overripe. Like he's a prospect who's ready for the NHL, but is he ready for Game 1 of the NHL Stanley Cup Finals?
Ready for top 4 duty in the Stanley Cup Finals is another question entirely.
Ready for Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk, have him in his sights. We'll see about that.
Or checking the crap out of him. Yeah. Well, it's going to be. If their goal is to beat the forecheck, then those are the guys that are more likely to do it. If their goal is to withstand the forecheck and give it back to them, then the more established 25-5 pair is. And all that said, it's a shift away from switching them back if it's not working. It's not like it's cast in concrete for the whole series.
The other move that they make, I really did like. They've created a third line with Matthias Janmark, Connor Brown, and Adam Henrique. And I think that is the third line. And then the fourth line will be Ryan McLeod, Warren Fogle, who checks back in, and Corey Perry, and sitting are Sam Carrick and Derek Ryan. So I really think so. Florida's third line is also really strong. This is the strength of their team, is these top lines. And it's Anton Lundell, who's a super solid 2-way center. Eetu Luosterainen, who is a very aggressive and 2-way winger. And Vladimir Tarasenko, formerly a first-line top-scoring player in the NHL, still a dangerous player, big, fast, heavy shot. So that's the third line on Florida. You needed, I think, something a little bit more. And I think the Oilers will have something a little bit more with Connor Brown, Janmark, and Henrique. Henrique, a very smart player. Matthias Janmark, also smart, extremely fierce in the playoffs. And Connor Brown, a worker, going up and down the ice, can make a play, can make a pass now. He's getting some of his skill and speed back. I love this third line. I think Brown and Janmark have earned more playing time, and this will be a way to get them more playing time, which is good for the Oilers. The Oilers are a better team if they're on the ice more. As for the the fourth line, I'd rather see Ryan or Carrick in than Corey Perry, but I don't. Corey Perry's had the odd big game, and he's had a week off here, so maybe he'll have a big game in Game 1, and they'll switch up after that or something if he doesn't. He's been slow to me throughout the playoffs, so I would have rather seen Ryan. But I don't have major questions about that like I do splitting up Kulak and Nurse. But how do you see it?
Perry's appeared slow to me since he took himself out in the Kings series. He tried to run some guy in the end of the sheet, and Perry got the penalty for the hit, but he also took the worst of it, and he went off with what seemed to be a knee issue. And the concern was he might be, right away, that could be the whole playoffs for him. Well, he's a tough guy and he'll play through anything, but these things cumulatively have had their effect, and he is 39 years old and not indestructible. But to me, he's not looked as good as I'd seen him earlier in the year since LA series.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that bad hit has something to do with it. He's playing through stuff clearly, and you can only hope that he'll raise his game to the occasion, which is this is what he lives for at this point. It's his fourth trip to the Stanley Cup Finals in the last 5.
It's cool. That's a cool.
4 different teams. The time he was on the winning side of one of them.
Any thought about the Henrique line?
Yeah, well, I like it. I've liked Brown and Janmark as wingers for a long time, and on the fourth line, like their goal is sort of, keep the game under control and stable, while the stars are on the bench resting up, and of course they also double as penalty killers, and the addition of Henrique, I think, is probably the best center they will have played with. They've spent time with Carrick. They've spent time with Ryan, mostly, and I think Henrique is a cut above that, and hopefully there'll be a little bit of offense to show for it. I mean, all of these guys have a history of scoring at least some. Even as Brown and Janmark were, Janmark was Edmonton's version of Sammy Paulson, go out there, nothing happens. And it's a useful player to have, especially in the Bettman Point era, to have, to have low event players like that. But they've got speed enough to, I think, sustain Henrique, who's not fast, but both Brown and Janmark can skate pretty well. And they've all got the veteran savvy. Among them, they got like 2,000 NHL games of experience. So it's got the makings of a solid, well, certainly third line, certainly bottom 6 line, but a good one.
Yeah, if you went into the year thinking you'd have a fourth line of a 20-goal scorer, Ryan McLeod and Corey Perry, you'd think, oh, that's a pretty good fourth line. And the third line is not that bad either. If you thought we'd have Adam Henrique, Connor Brown, and Matthias Janmark on the third line. I mean, not everyone's as big a Matthias Janmark fan as you and I are, but those are pretty good lines. I do too. So I like the forward lines a lot, and I think it's great that Henrique is healthy again. It gives you this option, and they really needed. I do think they needed to figure out someone who could really compete against that tough third line, because that's a tough third line of the Florida Panthers. There's some numbers indicate that the Oilers, I think it's the expected goals numbers, that the Oilers had a better expected goals percentage than Florida in the regular season, and that actually Edmonton's played tougher teams in terms of expected goals than Florida already, and Florida's generally played weaker teams, so Florida might be in for a bit of a shock. It's clearly not what the experts are saying, including the odds makers are saying, and the analysts. So
when it comes to expertise, I frankly trust the odds makers more, because what their expertise is slightly different. They're matching their expertise against what the market is doing, the betting market. They're just trying to balance it out. So they're reading how people are betting. So it's actually a whole different science than just trying to figure out which team is better. Sometimes, there's a favored team and they change the odds because of that, because they know people are going to bet on that team. So the odds on the one side versus the other, we're not quite measuring the same thing. But the betting professionals really know their stuff, is my experience. They know it well enough for me to stay far, far away from it.
Yeah, I don't even like.
I'm not on the house side.
I'm not sure if the odds reflect the interest in betting on a particular team as opposed to the ability of a particular team, and the interest in betting on a certain team at a certain odds. So I don't quite, I have never thought about it too hard, so I don't really get it either. I don't get it at all. So I can't say anything about it. If we knew what the top gamblers were betting on, then we might have more knowledge about that. But they're also factoring in the odds, right? Which changes the equation. It's not just which is the better team. It's like, what are the odds? Like, so anyway, Bruce, I just feel like, and I'm sure everyone, there's been enough talking. There's been enough weight. There's been enough words. Yep. It's time for hockey. I can't wait.
Coming on Saturday. This is Friday afternoon, so we're just now about 26 hours away from puck drop. Oilers Panthers. They played 7 games in the 2020s. Now they might be playing 7 games in the next 3 weeks.
Okay.
So there's not a lot of history. The history between these two franchises is just about to be made.
Indeed. All right, Bruce. Well, let's leave it there, and we'll talk again tomorrow night. Thanks for talking now.
Right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.